Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining and happy Pride Month. My name is Jasmine Ambrosia. For those of you who already know me, for those of you who don't, welcome to my stream. I'm a practicing witch, this, that, and the third. You can find all my links down below. But today I really want to have a conversation about gender, sexuality, and occultism. And I have a very special guest here on the channel today. I'm so excited to have you. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Reverend Yuri. I'm a witch, witch, and I'm also trans, but non-binary, but genderqueer. So I'm really excited to be here and discuss this with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. And I do have Yuri's YouTube link down below. And if there are any other links, Yuri, that you'd like me to add, I can add them after this stream.
Yeah, absolutely. My website's revyuriam.com, and you can also find me under revyuriam.
Yes, published author too.
Yeah, also, I have books as well. So always forget about it.
Well, thank you for joining me in today's conversation. Hello, Black Wolf. Hello, Pandora. Hello, Nocturnal. Hello, Nathan. Thank you for joining. So, I mean, it is June 2nd, right? We are 2 days now into Pride Month. And I would have liked to have a live yesterday to kick off the first day of Pride, but like things and like stuff, right?
Life.
So, but ideally, I mean, I would love to have, a wide spectrum of, our siblings in the craft and our sisters of cloak and our brothers of night of the LGBT spectrum who are into occultism and witchcraft here on my channel all month long. So this is just also kind of like my formal PSA that if you're down for that, please let me know. Because I'd like to do this all month long, just be super gay all month and like talk about witchcraft. Like that's what I'm trying to do. So I guess first, like, let's talk about gender. Let's talk about gender. Let's just go right into that.
Let's go right for it.
Yes, let's get right into that. So I don't know, where do we want to start?
It's a good question. I mean, gender is such a diverse topic, it seems, and it doesn't seem like everyone always understands what people mean by the word gender either. It seems like they get it confused with like their physical bodies, and or their sex, so to speak, and when they're actually different things. Your gender is more psychological rather than your physical body. Sometimes they match, sometimes they don't. We have trans people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, for me, what it is, there's physical sex, which is like a physicality thing. And then there's gender, which is like not a physicality thing. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
So how does gender for you sculpt your witchcraft, your practice, if at all?
I mean, I guess from an early age, I was really captivated by the image of Sirius Levi's Baphomet, which is a gender ambiguous creature. Has phallus as well as breasts, male and female. It's the all. And I would say that really impacted me. And as I've always been drawn to the more feminine side of things, and as I got older and started learning terms, and started to explore stuff, I realized I wasn't like the other boys, so to speak. And after years of self-discovery, reflection, and really working through it, witchcraft led me to realize that I was gender queer. And it's really I wouldn't say it's necessarily the first and like foremost role in the witchcraft, but which certainly influenced my perception of myself and my gender.
Yeah, I don't know how my witchcraft is influenced by my gender as like, a soul who is very much having like a trans femme experience. I don't know if I necessarily really think of gender in terms of my craft. Like I personally definitely lean more towards, I would say, like this divine feminine aspect and divine feminine archetype. but I can't say for sure whether or not that is something that is sculpted because I'm trans. Because if I was cis, theoretically, like it could also be very like divine femme leaning. I think that because I am trans, I think that I look for more, you know, deities or spirits who resonate with that sort of frequency. And like, so when you're talking about Baphomet, like, absolutely, you know, like even aside from just being a trans person, I resonate with Baphomet. But I think because I am a trans person, I identify even more with that imagery than maybe I would if I was cis. And then I also think of like, in terms of other pagan, you know, deities, I was actually watching a really interesting, I don't want to call it a podcast because I mean, it had video to it too. So I guess documentary about like various pagan gods. Okay. I just saw Orly's comment. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Okay. Or, okay, me muting when you're talking. I think that's what that is. But it was about like various pagan gods, right? And it was talking about like a lot of Greco-Roman, which like of course we know a lot of the Greco-Roman deities are like hella gay. Like from Pan and like Dionysus and like Aphrodite and like Apollo. I cannot tell you how many male entertainers I know who like their stage name is Apollo. Like literally.
And then, of course, there's also Hermaphrodite, which is the cross between Hermes and Aphrodite. And where else do we get the term Hermaphrodite from?
Yeah. Yeah. And then like, don't we also theoretically, according to this, we're going to call it a documentary, and I'll see if I can maybe post it in the description down below. But according to this documentary as well, like, isn't that also where we get like pansexual from, is from like Pan? Like, because that's what they were very much saying in like in the documentary is like panic, pansexual, and like these words being linked to this specific deity.
Yeah, that's where someone wanted to come on, say hello. Yes, yeah, we get the words panic from Pan, involving like you know, from because the feeling of panic is one that you would feel when Pan was around, or you know, or so to speak. And then also, you know, Pan meaning all in Greek, hence you know you'd get pansexual, or you know, meaning you know all sexualities, or you know, pangendered, all genders, or any.
So I think this is a really good question from Black Wolf. I'm going to highlight it here up on the screen. I'll let you go ahead and answer first, Yuri, and then I'll share my side of that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say that like male and female, or the idea of them being divided and separate, is very much like a physical world phenomenon. Like to a certain degree, you might see it reflected within the spirit realm, but you know, it's not in the same way that we perceive it in physical. So, so you know, you'll find some spirits that present one way, and then to some people, and present it in another way to other people, and it's just really, I don't know. I mean, my background. I have a little small background and understanding of the fairy tradition of American witchcraft, and there, you know, the star goddess is known as God herself, or Hir, and because you know, sure, we can consider it a goddess, but ultimately it's everything and nothing. So therefore, it would be both male and female, while being neither.
Yeah, I think that in terms of like, you know, how spirits might show themselves to us, I think that my opinion is a little bit like controversial, especially on Witch Talk, which, by the way, if you guys are on TikTok, you can follow me at 3 Obsidian Eyes. I'm on TikTok, kind of like blowing up over there. It's kind of crazy. Like, it's kind of like, but yeah, so I'm over there on TikTok. And I personally feel like, you know, people have these very real experiences with deities, with spirits, angels, demons, gods, guides, guardians, ancestors, whatever. And when multiple different people are interacting with the same entity or God or spirit, there's differences there in how those interactions go. And I've seen this like right now on Witch Talk, a lot of witches are arguing about, this witch says they're working with Hecate and having this experience, but like Hecate shows herself like this. So clearly you're wrong and da 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 da. Like, and I feel like, the gods, spirits, guides, guardians, whatever, like they show themselves to us in a way that we can understand it. And to me, like energy, just energy as a whole, as someone who like considers myself a very soft polytheist, I think energy is genderless entirely. Like I think energy is energy. And I did a video here on my channel talking about the dark goddess and like what the dark goddess means for me and how I became like a devotee of the dark goddess and what that looks like. And in that video, I talk extensively about, because I love food. Okay. Your girl's a chunker. I feel like the divine is I believe in one universal source, me personally. Whether you want to call this God, whether you want to call this Brahma, whether you want to call this the universe, whether you want to call this the dark mother, the abyss, whatever, I believe in one eternal source that all things have come from and all things shall return to. And this source, the energy that comes down from this source into the cosmos, has been personified from different cultures and geographic locations and, linguistics. So like the energy of love, sex, and seduction, for some people, they might adhere that to like Freya. And for some people, they might adhere that to Venus. And for some people, they might adhere that to Jezebel. Like, I feel like these energies have different names. And while I believe they are like separate from each other, like I don't believe at all that like Freya and Venus are the same. I think that the energy that flows down into these personifications are very similar. And their differences are based off of geography and language and culture. So, and I respect their differences, but I believe ultimately they come from the same source and they're kind of a similar frequency. And I talk about that also, like when I'm talking about like the dark goddess archetype, which is a relatively newer, neo-pagan, like some witches are like, oh, that's new. That's the new pagan shit. That's da 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 da. Okay. But Gerald Gardner vibe. We're talking like what, our grandparents' generation? Okay. Like, give me a break. Just because something's new doesn't mean it doesn't have value. You know what I'm saying? And so when I'm talking about dark goddess, whether we're talking about Sekhmet or Kali Ma or Hel or Hecate or the Morrigan, we're still looking at similar. I'm not saying they're the same. I'm saying they're similar. So in terms of like how spirits or deities might manifest to you in the physical flesh, we have a lot of folklore and mythology that supports otherworldly beings not following worldly rules. So like, I don't believe that like a spirit has to manifest the same way to everybody. So I think for some spirits, you may see them as masculine. I may see them as feminine. That doesn't mean that we're not experiencing the same energy, because I think energy itself is 1, limitless, 2, ageless and timeless, and 3, genderless. Like it exists.
Yeah, it's many masks, one essence. It's the way I feel, but it's very Eastern inspired outlook.
We had another question here as well from Nathan. I have a question. When being some traditions had the ideas of ideology for the divine masculine and divine feminine last couple of years, I wanted kind of a full spectrum of divine. So I decided to add a non-binary representation. What are your thoughts of the idea of a divine non-binary? I'll start first, Yuri, and then you can take after me too. I'm not someone who identifies as non-binary. I have plenty of friends. I have members of the coven who are non-binary. And I believe them to be valid and accepted and important members of not only the T community, but also the LGBT community and also the craft community. I think that we all have a valuable space here to occupy. And to also take this to like that dark goddess video that I talked about, I very much, and some people are like, oh, well, you're not, a soft polytheist, you're an atheist for saying this. But I very much think that, like, as above, so below, I believe that we are living manifestations of the divine expressed. So that means that myself, Yuri, all of you watching this are manifestations of the divine. So why wouldn't there be non-binary deities or spirits when there are non-binary people? Because I believe everything, for better or for worse, for good and bad, for beautiful and ugly, for male and female, and for everything in between, comes from the divine.
I very much agree. I mean, as far as like non-binary like deities go, I mean the divine source would be a non-binary deity. I mentioned the fairy tradition where they talk about the star goddess and they call her God herself. To kind of shock you into like thinking about this idea in a different way, or in my own personal practice, we call that chaos in like the Greek sense, um, or the void even. And there's it's the all, then it's the none. So it's neither male nor female, while simultaneously being both.
Well, and I want to say too, like, I love being a person of trans experience. I feel very powerful and I feel very liminal myself. Like, I believe as a trans person, I believe that my existence in the flesh is inherently liminal. So if I think of one way that my gender has affected my practice, I also think of when I go and work with our local Hindu community at the Mandir around the corner from my house, and a lot of their pujaris, a lot of their priests are trans, because we have like the recognition of 5 genders in India, and the caste system and everything. And I personally, I'm not saying that as a trans person, I'm more spiritual than a cis person. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that my experience is inherently liminal, meaning that I'm inherently walking between worlds day to day, as a trans person, because I'm moving back and forth between these, especially as a trans person of experience in the West, where I live. We have very dated, problematic, stereotypical binary norms where I live, and things are progressing and things are changing. But I still deal with these stereotypes where I'm walking between these stereotypes as a trans person of experience. And I've also noticed, certain privileges even within the trans community where, I have some trans, some friends, some siblings, right, who, because they don't fit for cisgender people, because cisgender people love these like very tight boxes.
Yes,
They love to really define stuff in boxes. So that, because I think some of that is cultural, and I also think some of that is cis people just don't walk in this liminal space the same way. I'm not saying they can't walk in liminal space, but as a cis person, you will never know what it's like, for someone who's trans, who's walking in this space. Like, that's just it, babe. That's just it. Sorry if you don't like that, but that's just the real true tea. Okay. And they like to put things in boxes. So, I have a really good girlfriend of mine who is trans femme, and she has a full beard and she identifies as she, her, right? And that's her identity and that's who she is. And she is equally as much of a woman as myself, any other trans person, or any other cis person. But because she has this very stereotypically masculine feature, it's like they want to put her in this box. So like there's been times where, like, she's just trying to go to the bathroom and literally shit and piss in peace. Like, let me just say this too, this whole thing about like trans people infiltrating your bathrooms, trust and believe, number one, that's literally never happened. Number two, I'm just trying to go pee. Like, I think you're being the weirdo trying to like look underneath the stall to see like what's going on in there. Okay. Um, but yeah, I think that, and I hadn't really thought of this before now, but I think in terms of how gender has affected, like, I think naturally as trans people, you know, we're liminal. So yeah, I've kind of gone on on a little bit of a rant there, but
No, it was a good rant though, and I very much agree that being genderqueer myself, it's a very liminal existence, and I've gotten some criticism from cis people in the past, because well, I'm genderqueer, so non-binary, I'm not going to necessarily fit into either male or female. I definitely lean towards the more feminine most of the time, but a few years ago, I got depressed. There was a lot of trans violence going on in the neighborhood I lived in, and I grew out a beard so no one would think that I was someone they should kill. And then I got really depressed about that, like just thinking about that fact and how easy it was for me to like just kind of transition and go into the shadows in order to be safe, and how other people didn't have that opportunity. And it really fucked with me. And then later on, because there was pictures of me with a beard, people tried to say that I was like fake trans, like that's a thing. Um, so but yeah, no, it's a very liminal experience, and being able to like shift between the worlds and the expressions is an inherently magical thing. We're creating our own realities for ourselves.
right. And like, to piggyback off of that even more, like, I just want to say that, you know, regardless of someone's physical expression, like, when they tell you who they are, just believe them. Like, just
So,
believe them. I have, like I said, I have a very close friend of mine who is a trans femme, who she's femme from her head to her toes, and she has a beard, and she's unapologetic about it. And I love her. Like, and I so admire her because we do walk between these worlds. It's almost like in one way, we're not given certain privileges because we are trans. But then in another way, we are given certain privileges if we walk this line for, you know, the culture that we are in and for people from a cisgender gaze. I know that, like, for myself, not necessarily in today, but for myself in my experience, I have often felt very, very pressured to display like hyper femininity,
oh yes,
you know, like to almost make this, make who I am like more than what it is. Like, it's like they want me to perform femininity for them in order for them to be able to somehow in their mind figure out and like understand that I'm a woman, when, you know, the same expectations that are over trans femme women are not necessarily given to cis women. You know, like, cis women aren't necessarily always walking around out and about like full glam, like they're about to be on the cover of Vogue. But if a trans woman isn't living up to these unrealistic Western Euro beauty standards, she's not inherently a woman just off the bat. And then also, too, like, we have a lot of toxicity, I feel like, within our own community where, and I've had to check other trans femmes myself before, where, you know, I allowed into these certain spaces because, oh, well, she passes, or she's like this, or she's like that. And I've even had people before on my channel or in real life who have said horrible, horrible transphobic things to me, not realizing that I'm trans and thinking that it's okay to say. But yet, like, my girlfriend with the beard over here, like, you would treat differently. And I know that they would, you know? Um, the drag community, ugh, like, I'm not coming for drag. I think it's a wonderful art form. But myself, just my own experience with my local community here, there's a lot of very toxic femininity where it's like this mean girl stuff. And it's like a lot of these girls, you know, didn't live that experience in high school. And so they're in like their 30s and 40s acting like this mean girl because they never got to live that out.
it's sad, but no, it's unfortunate. Like, I feel like in regards to like society wanting, especially trans femme people to uh, display that like hyper femininity and having that even higher standard for trans folk. You know, it's part of, I guess, to make them feel more comfortable with their existence, or for feeling attracted to us. Like, oh, look, you know, you're all glammed up, like a, you know, like some kind of fantasy in my mind. And I mean, I've been in relationships in the past where like I was certainly fetishized just for the fact that, you know, it was a male-bodied person that wore dresses and makeup. And like, when you realize that, it makes you feel absolutely horrible. It's like, don't I have any kind of value past that, or is it just because I'm pretty? Like, and it's like, or you know, I'm not even that I'm pretty. I'm just like some kind of weird fetish object for you. You know, it doesn't make you feel pretty. That's for sure.
So we have this question here from Black Wolf Midnight Land. Um, and it says, actually, topic that could be kind of off in this conversation, but what are your opinions about one sex dominated practices? Meaning, for example, Diana's cult dedicated to women or the other way around. I have very strong feelings about this, but I would love to hear Yuri, what you have to say. So I'll let you start then with answering this question, and then I'll just kind of piggyback off what you say.
Sure. I think it's kind of silly to say like a practice or a particular god or spirit is off limits because of, or it's only, you know, for one specific kind of person. Um, you know, like, I don't know, you, because both, all people, I mean, masculine and feminine is a, and divinity is like, it's a spectrum. It's never, so like both everyone can have the experience of the other regardless. And it's just a very narrow-minded kind of, I don't know, I guess conservative way of looking at things. Like, well, you're not a woman or a natural born woman or whatever, you know, your excuse is, like, so you can't somehow experience this divine feminine thing, or because you're a woman you can't experience this divine masculine thing, when, you know, they're just like polarities. Essentially, they're all part of, they're both parts of the same thing. They're just one half. And so yeah, that would be my perspective on it.
So I agree with everything that you said just off the bat. You know, I've seen and I've had people talk to me, and I've also just seen online, like, you know, a lot of masculine, even hetero cis men out there who like want to work with Hecate or they want to work with Lilith. And they're like, is this a space for me? Can I do so? And my answer to that is very similar, Yuri, to yours, in the sense that like your relationship to the divine is your own. And I absolutely agree with that. Um, my kind of like thing about this, and where it's kind of soft for me personally, is just from my own local community experience, in the sense that every single time, you know, men have a men's only something, right? Like if men have a fraternity, or if men have a men's only, there's several men's only groups, magical groups where I live, you know, and never once has a woman ever been like, well, why won't you accept me? Ah, like that doesn't happen, right? Like we just kind of are like, okay, well, that's not a space for me. Cool. But when the script is kind of flipped and there's like women's only spaces, a lot of times, in my opinion, it's a lot of male privilege and patriarchal aspects that kind of come out because they automatically think that they're entitled to this space. And even myself as a trans woman, like I have been denied spaces because I'm a trans woman, right? Like there are some Dianic covens out there who, honey, I'm a woman all day long, from my head to my toe. You know what I mean? From the top, make it drop. But someone of my experience may not be welcome there. And instead of me really raising a fuss about it, why would I want to be included there? Like, you know what I mean? Like if they can't recognize the sacredness of that experience, that's not a space for me, and that's okay. Recently, and I'm not going to go into details on live, Yuri, but we can talk about this more in detail and I can spill tea off air. However, recently in the local group that I admin on Facebook, and I created this Facebook group like 6 years ago. It's called Witches and Pagans of India Gathering. It's a local Facebook group for the 317 Indianapolis where I live, because at that time we didn't have one. We had a Chicago and we had an Indiana, but we didn't have a city group. So I created this group. My coven not this past, but at Ostara, shared a coven photo where the whole coven was all in a photo together. And it was our first Sabbat where we all got together since really like before COVID, you know? And we took a photo and the photo was posted. And several, not one, not just one, several cis hetero white men, of course, because they're usually the ones, decided to then comment on the post saying, wow, I guess this is women's only, or, so it's only for women, or you guys really need to recognize the divine masculine, not knowing there are trans men and non-binary people pictured in the coven and that we have in the coven. And also the coven doesn't have anything against men. Like we just haven't had any cis hetero masculine presenting men initiate. That's not because we're not allowing them to enter our space. That just hasn't happened. And to me, it's very much like, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of going on a rant here, but when I have that experience happen, it's like, there's an amount of privilege that goes into this conversation of just men in general feeling entitled to women's spaces. And I'm not even saying that, you know, the particular coven that I am in is a women's only thing, but I'm saying like, if I did see a photo online of a magical group, and if I even did perceive them as all masculine and male and cis, let's just say for the sake of conversation, that's how I perceived it, right? I would probably just keep scrolling. It wouldn't even occur to me to comment on someone else's thing on like a Facebook group and be like, well, so I guess you don't give a shit about me. Like, I wouldn't even think to do that. But yeah, in terms of, I guess, this question, Black Wolf, I feel like if there are Dianic Wiccan covens out there who want to keep it just for menstruating, especially like this red tent stuff, if they want to keep it for menstruating cis women only, that's really none of my business. That's not my practice. That's not what I share. But it's one thing for a group to say this space is ours, right? It's another thing to say you're not welcome in the community as a whole. And I run into this also with covenry as well. There are times where people want to join the coven and want to initiate and they aren't welcome. That doesn't mean that we're saying you can't be a part of the witchcraft community. That doesn't mean that we're not saying you can't be a part of the pagan community. That just means that per our individual group, per our individual coven, we are not trying to share sacred space with you on a personal level outside of just, you know, civil conversations. What do you think of that, Yuri? Because that's kind of where I guess that's the passion that I'm speaking from.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. People are allowed to have their own spaces where they define it. It's a safe space for, you know, its own particular thing. And just because you can't go into one area, as long as you're not, you have a space to go to, then it's not such a big deal. You know, if, you know, I think it's I personally feel like the Dianic Wicca thing is kind of silly from my personal experience of the divine and the divine feminine. But you know, some people they find that really empowering, and you know, in such a male-dominated society, I can see the appeal to in that, and of being able to like hold that special space and be like, no, this is ours, no men. I don't like the way they treat trans, or some of them will treat trans people, but you know, obviously, I'm not down with the turfs. Um, but yeah, everyone's welcome to have their own space, and just because you know you're not a good fit for that space doesn't mean that you can't exist in the greater space as a whole.
Yeah, I want to say too, like, I'm definitely not down with the turfs either. And, you know, that would be where my issues would come into like Dianic groups is like, there is some very J.K. Rowling-esque stuff going on. But even still, even for the Dianic groups that are turfy, I wouldn't want to be in their group anyway. Like, so there's that. Like, you can't sit with us, honey. It's not the other way around. Right. And then, okay. So let's talk about sex because we're 34 minutes into this live and we might have to make a part two.
What?
Darn.
Oh no.
Darn. So let's talk a little bit about sexuality, right? Because I think that some people aren't fully actually aware that like gender identity and sexual orientation are different, you know?
Right.
And so how so like talk a little bit about, I guess we'll talk a little bit about our sexualities and how, if at all, that has influenced our craft. So I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, me personally, I guess I don't know. Mostly attracted to more feminine sides, not so necessarily concerned with what the bits downstairs are. Um, and swing both ways. And magically speaking, it's just kind of, I guess, doesn't have like an active aspect to it. I mean, sex is magical and sacred, and I treat it that way. But yeah, as far as like my sexuality impacting my magic, I think it's a lot like my, gender expression, and that it's the other way around, that the magic, the witchcraft has really impacted my sexuality by, empowering me and helping me to truly understand like who I am and what what fuels me, what drives me, what excites me.
Okay, so I love that how you said that, it's the other way around. Like that's so poetic. Chef's kiss, honestly. Um, and I don't know if I can be as poetic as that, but I would say that my sexuality is something that I am continuously exploring. My sexuality is something that I don't necessarily feel, a strong need to even label. Um, at this time, while I'm recording, if I had to like label my sexuality, I would probably identify more with like being like pan, you know, like pan romantic, um, I would say. Um, but that's also how it is now. And my sexuality is something that very much has like kind of came and gone. I mean, there's been large periods of my life where I've lived a very asexual experience, and there's been periods of my life where I've lived a very sexual experience. And my sexuality has changed over time, where, for a while, it's like I'm attracted to a specific archetype and then it shifts. And it's something that I'm still exploring, well into my 30s. I'm still exploring, sexuality and trying to understand what that means for me. So I think how Yuri said that it's the craft that kind of comes in, you know, and sculpts and shapes, and then vice versa, where like, our sexuality might sculpt our craft. I very much resonate with that because I don't know if I can really label it like if there was a sliding scale. Because I identify with, that more than just a binary of you're gay and you're straight and then you're bi. Like, I think there's more than just three choices here, you know?
Well,
Um, my kind of thing is like, if I'm attracted to you, um, you're gonna know. And if I'm down, like if I'm down with the sickness, like I'll let you know. And we can kind of take it from there. At this time, I am very happily married to a very masculine, cis, heterosexual man, and we have a great life together, and we're monogamous, and that's where we are right now. Um, I believe that things can always change, but where we are right now, that is where we are. And I do want to say, in unison, kind of with this, that because I am a trans woman of experience who is in a relationship and is married to a cis man who identifies as heterosexual, of course, there is so much controversy around what it is that we do and how he chooses to identify. Um, and then also, like, when I enter LGBT spaces, how my husband and I are perceived is very different. And, privileges that maybe would be granted to some people aren't always granted to us when we enter these spaces, because sometimes we are perceived as like outsiders who are just like looking to have a kiki at the gay bar versus like genuine people in this community. So I think that there's like definitely a dialogue around, you know, advantages and disadvantages, I guess, because when I have been at gay bars before with like my trans femme sisters, we are not always necessarily treated that way. But I will say that like when I've done events and stuff from our business at like gay bars, because we do a lot of work with that, doing, you know, readings and stuff like that and supporting our drag community and our LGBT community and doing charity events and fundraisers and all those things. Like sometimes if I don't have like white cis gay men on my shoulders here, like I don't make as much money as I could. And like, that's just a thing that, you know, I know about how my experience is and my local gay community. I'm not saying I wear my GBFs as handbags, but I'm saying they make me more approachable in the community when I'm working at these events in these specific locations. So yeah, but anyway, I'm getting on a rant again. But in terms of my sexuality, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And that's okay. Like, I just, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's it's always kind of, you know, the universe is always shifting and expanding, and things are collapsing and re-expanding. So, you know, sexuality doesn't need to be a static thing. The universe is always changing. So there's no reason why you can't. As you know, Genesis P. Orge once said to me, every day is a chance to reinvent yourself. So
Well, and my thing too is like, there have been times where like I have felt attracted to men, women, people who, you know, represent the in between or both and neither. You know, there have been times where I've been attracted to trans people, cis people, whatever. Like, I feel so limited. Like, that's why I even hesitate to say pansexual, because not even that really. Like, I don't even really identify with that either. But I know I'm not heterosexual. I do know that. If there's anything about my sexuality I can say for sure is that I'm not heterosexual. So, um, yeah. I'm looking here at the chat now. Okay. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment them down below. We have like another 15 minutes left of this live. Do you have anything that you, Yuri, would like to add about gender or sexuality and occultism? Is there anything on your mind weighing heavy on your spirit vibe?
no, not at the moment. Nothing laying heavy. I feel like we've covered a lot, and some of the things that have been laying heavy, I got a chance to voice. So
Yeah, I don't know. See, because my thing is like, if I know that when we end this live, there's going to be like 4 things. I'm like, damn,
yeah,
why
once
didn't
we're
I, why didn't I talk about that? And I'm sure hopefully we'll be able to do another one of these during Pride Month because it's Pride Month and we deserve it. And oh, on that note, something did just kind of like pop in my mind. I wish that, you know, I think back to myself when I first kind of started getting into the craft. You know, when I first started really getting interested and first started, well, when I first kind of was coming in, I was probably about 13 or 14. And I started really kind of dabbling in the craft when I was about 16. And I probably didn't actually start seriously practicing until I was about 17, 18, where I was actually, you know, identifying myself with the label of witch, right? Like not just like being on Google, being like, how to do a love spell. Like, because that was me at 14. Like, that was definitely me. How to like put a terrible curse on these bullies. Like, that was me. I wish that, and I think that the witches of this new generation are coming into such a broken, damaged world, but in some ways so much better. And I hope that in these ways of representation of like, you know, Yuri, what you and I are doing right now, just by being on this, my small little YouTube channel, right? Like it's just a small little channel, but everything has influence and power. And I just wish that I could go back in time sometimes to like my 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 12-year-old self and just be a representation of like this is what it is and this is what it can look like and this is what it can be, and like that's sacred and that's valid and that's okay and like you're welcome here, because I have lived so much of my life. I mean, growing up I had a wonderful family. I, you know, like in some ways I almost feel bad talking about my story because I know how many, you know, people have had it so much worse, right? Like, not that this is the pain Olympics here, but I just wish that there was more representation of people of color and of people of, you know, LGBT experience, like this new Craft movie or this new Craft series, right? Where they're Afro Latina. There was nothing really like that that I was seeing at the time growing up, or watching Sabrina and there being, you know, a trans character in this Netflix and edition of Sabrina. Like there was nothing out there. And so growing up for myself, and I'm not saying this is your experience, but for myself, it was like there was no one like me out there, right? And so it was like I'm different. And like to an extent, yeah, I am kind of strange and I am kind of different, but it's not actually necessarily because I'm trans. I'm just weird. And like it took me a while to get that. And I think that the powerful thing that what we are doing is, in a small way, we could have people watching us right now on this live, or we could have people watching us in 3 years from now who are questioning their sexuality or their gender identity, who are watching this live and are feeling like they now can step into their own actuality because they've seen someone else taking up space with this energy, you know? And I think that that is why I want to make June so gay on my channel. And like, so I want to have these conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Back in when I was coming up, we didn't have those representations. Like you were, even trans wasn't being very well represented. And like if you did see something, it was like, some cis gay person on TV, but it wasn't. That was it. Like you had Will and Grace. That was your representation. And like so, coming into the craft, and having like these questions and having these experiences and not really being sure, it felt very frightening and very, very weird. And it wasn't until, some years later in my early 20s when I discovered a friend introduced me to the poetry of Victor Anderson and introduced me to the fairy tradition, that I was really able to find like that very like queer witchcraft space where I was able to start to blossom and really find myself and be comfortable. So, it's really exciting that today things they're changing. We're able to do this and take up this space and offer that representation for the community at large.
Well, and I want to say too, definitely before we get off air, if I haven't made this already evidently clear, if any of you are watching this, let me just kind of talk to anyone watching, right? Like if anyone is watching this right now who is in any form of closet or who is questioning, their identity and their sexuality, and who is also in this craft-based community. So often in religious communities, people on the LGBT variants are very much treated with hostility. And unfortunately, okay, I think a lot of people assume that craft and pagan communities are inherently more welcoming. And while a lot of times that is true, trust me, we have plenty of homophobes, transphobes, and bigots in this community here as well. And I just want to make it like very evidently clear that like you are so fucking welcome and so fucking valid. And you absolutely, I would encourage, I'm not going to tell you anyone what to do, but I would encourage you to understand your own divine sacredness, whether you are, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, whatever, asexual, pansexual, whatever. Like, I encourage you to find that sacredness within you, um, and live in that truth if you are able to, when you are able to, and understand that also your journey doesn't have to be linear. That's something that I myself, have had to learn, that this experience is not a linear experience, and that you can fluctuate in and out of this experience, and it doesn't make you any more valid. And regardless of what people in the craft community or people in the LGBTQ community say, like, you're valid and you're welcome. And if you need someone to give you free mom hugs, like, let me know, because I'm down. Like, I will be like your mommy in the craft, and I will give you some good mom hugs. Okay. I'll make you some tea, maybe some cookies. You can come on over, have a little seat, have a little talk.
Did we just synchronize our drinking?
Maybe, yeah. I think I saw a
No.
question up here. Let's see. Okay, we do have a question from Nathan, and they would like to know, do you have any magical experience that you would like to share about your gender identity or your sexuality, and favorite moments? Go ahead, Yuri. Take it away, babe.
Well, so when I was younger, a wee baby witch, I had mastering witchcraft and the local library's folklore section and the demonology. I went to make a pact with Lilith, and then I had a very strange dream after to become a witch, and then or to cement the fact that I was a witch, to be young and 16 again. And then a few weeks later, I had a dream at the new moon that I wouldn't be a witch until I knew what it was like to suffer as a woman. And at the time, still very much a kind of awkward boy. And so it was a very, very weird dream. And then years later, like looking back on that, seeing it kind of come true to a degree is it was very interesting. So that's there.
So the first thing that comes into my mind is something that, like, I'm not going to go into extreme detail on a YouTube live about per se. But members of our LGBTQ community have a much higher statistic of mental health issues, and this is not a secret. Statistics for trans women being abused in various ways, and some of those ways I'm not even going to say here on this YouTube live because the algorithms get really mad when that sort of language gets used, is very high. And I myself, in some ways, are some of these statistics. And it was through growing up, even in a space where I was fostered and accepted and loved and cared for and never rejected and celebrated and had all these opportunities that so many trans people growing up never get. Like, my mother was hands down the best parent for an LGBT child that you could ask for. I mean, she knew that I was trans before I was even born. And the story there is she was pregnant with me. And my family, if you don't know, you can go and look at my videos, but I have my family on my channel sometimes, and my family is very woo-woo. There's people in my family who they might not call themselves witches, but very spiritual, very superstitious, and we have a lot of folk cultural practices. Well, my mother was convinced that she was having a girl when she was pregnant with me. Like, she was convinced, right? And my family does also practice and honor Western medicine as well. And when my mom was at the doctor's at the ultrasound, they were like, oh my gosh, like, congratulations, like, you're having a healthy boy. And she was like, are you sure? And the doctors was like, well, yeah, ma'am, see that there on the, they were doing the ultrasound. And my mom was just shocked because she's had these dreams and these visions and these feelings. And she peed into a cup of coffee and it smelled a certain way and changed a certain color, right? Like these folk practices. Hung a pendulum over her belly and it said a certain thing. And she was just so shocked and bewildered that the doctors were telling her that, like, you're going to have a little boy. And she couldn't understand. She was like, oh my gosh. So then my grandmother and my mother were like, okay, like, we are going to have, like, you know, a gay male family member in our family. And like, we need to prepare for some of what this member is going to be going through in their life, and like mentally prepare yourself to be like the mother of a gay son who comes home crying because kids at school called them the 3-letter F word. Right. Well, I'm born, and there's a family video. It's on a VHS tape somewhere. I haven't converted it, but I've seen it. I don't remember it, but myself and my sister, we are very young. We're like infants, like barely can talk. And we're in a bathtub, and I'm like looking at my sister like she's a mutant because like she's inside out. And my mom is like, "What?" And I was like, "Something's wrong with her. Like she's broken or something." My mom is just like not really understanding. And like, you know, I had told her like, Mom, like something's not right here, da 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 da. And then so then it kind of clicked for her. And this is even really before the word transgender was even really as much in the media as it is now. You know, like we didn't have anyone in our local area who was trans. I was the first trans student at my high school, at my junior high. Like I started physically and medically transitioning at a very early age. And that's why sometimes I feel bad about talking about some of my experience, because of how amazing and totally like unusual my experience has been with my family and my friends because of that. However, I have had such a mixed bag when it comes to not only gender dysmorphia as a trans person, but severe, severe body dysmorphia and mental illness. So to go into Nathan's question about magical experiences I've had in this experience, if it wasn't for the craft and if it wasn't for my connection to the divine, I fundamentally like would not be here on this live right now. And I know to some people that might sound kind of like theatrical or dramatic, but I'm very serious like when I say this. And my dark goddess tattoos, like on my arm and my thighs, you know, these are tattoos that I've gotten and that I've gone through a blood right initiation by getting them. But like, it is through immense suffering, mental illness, and years of self-harm that I actually met what I consider to be the dark goddess. And in my opinion, that's really truly what like saved me. So if it wasn't for the craft, like people say, like, what has witchcraft done for you? Witchcraft literally saved my life. Like that's how serious it is for me. Like it's not a game. So maybe that's not the most fun, like upbeat sort of story, but that's my experience. And that's what comes to my mind first is like, you know, having situations where I tried to take my own mortality in my own hands and like going through that as a direct result of my gender and body dysmorphia. So yeah, I can definitely go on a tangent there, but I should stop because I'm looking at this now and we're about at 58 minutes. So we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 to this, Yuri.
That sounds good to me. I'm down for that.
And seriously, thank you so much for coming on and agreeing to do this, because I really, really feel like this is the good work just by existing and showing other people, be it, you know, young people who are watching or even people in their 50s, 60s, and 40s, that like your identity and your experience is so valid and you are so sacred regardless of your expression.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been really good to do this.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone who has been in the chat as well. Like there's been lots of amazing supportive comments. And I want you guys to know that I try to read all of them. It's hard sometimes while we're on live, but I really appreciate all the support, and definitely look for a part 2 to this. And I'm going to be trying to really focus on, LGBT related topics and issues this month in June on my channel. So, and please check out Yuri's channel as well. All of the links are down in the description, so you can definitely check out all of the links. And yeah, thank you all for joining. And I think we're going to end it here. So, blessed be, and see you in hell.
Nada.